Alien girl warns human about the night wind, but human hears it calling only her name. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. The high plains of Varelia stretched under a sky veined with pale auroras, the wind already teasing the metal frames of the weather turbines as Ethan Walker tightened the bolts on a shivering mast. His breath fogged in the cold, thin air, and the helmet HUD flickered with warnings about pressure shifts rolling in from the northern ridge. He had been out here for hours, just him, a malfunctioning wind sensor, and the endless sweep of alien night coming on fast. As the last bolt clicked into place, a tremor hummed through the mast, followed by a low, layered whisper riding the rising gust. Ethan froze. The wind pushed against his suit like a living thing, brushing past his ears with a sound too deliberate to be static. It carried something, a name he had never heard before. Lyrian. The whisper came again, a little clearer, as if the wind itself leaned close, trying to make sure he understood. Ethan shook his head, adjusting his audio filters, telling himself it was interference bouncing off the cliffs, maybe a trick of harmonics or the turbine blades catching a strange angle. Anything but what it felt like. The wind rose a little more, circling him, brushing cold fingertips along the back of his neck. Lyrian. He stepped back instinctively, boots crunching against the frost. Nope, he muttered, forcing a breath. Just noise. Just wind. But the whisper didn't sound like noise. It sounded aware. By the time he made the walk back toward the outpost path, the sky had darkened into deep navy streaked with aurora light, the kind that danced silently but made the air feel charged, almost expectant. Ethan kept replaying the sound in his head, trying to match the cadence, the shape of the syllables, anything that could ground it in something normal. But nothing fit. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the name lodged in his chest, as if meant for him. A faint glow appeared ahead. Small shimmering lanterns hung from curved wooden posts. He didn't remember those being here earlier. Following the winding lights, he reached a cluster of pale stone dwellings nestled against a ridge. A figure stood near the entrance, adjusting a line of softly glowing wind chimes carved from crystal. She turned at the sound of his approach. Her skin was a soft blue-silver that reflected the aurora like water, her eyes wide, alert, and colored like dusk. You should not be out in the open after sundown, she said, her voice low but carrying easily in the still air. The night wind is coming. Ethan managed a tired half-smile. Yeah, I heard something strange out there. Probably just bad harmonics. Her expression tightened, not with fear, something heavier. It wasn't harmonics. If the night wind spoke, you should leave this place before it speaks again. Ethan frowned. It said a name. Lyrian. Means anything to you? The girl stilled completely, her fingers closing around a chime until the light inside it dimmed. That is my name, she whispered. And for the first time since Ethan stepped onto this planet, the wind around them went utterly, impossibly quiet. Irene stood completely still, the soft glow from the crystal chimes painting silver lines along her cheeks as the quiet stretched between them. Ethan felt the cold shift, the kind that was not just temperature but atmosphere, as if the air itself was holding its breath. He tried to ease the tension with a steady voice, even though his heart was thudding harder than he liked. Look, I did not mean to scare you. I just heard it. Maybe it was echoing from somewhere near your village. Lyrian shook her head gently, the motion small but certain. The night wind does not echo. It listens, and it repeats only what it intends. Her eyes lifted to the darkening sky where the auroras thickened like drifting ribbons. If it spoke my name to you, then it has already crossed the boundary. Ethan glanced at the lantern-lit path behind him. Boundary. She stepped closer, and the chimes behind her responded with a soft harmonic tremor, as if tuned to her presence. Our elders say the night wind cannot choose someone on its own. It can only reflect the strongest call it hears after dusk. It will take that call and return it. Sometimes it brings warnings. Other times, she stopped herself, lowering her gaze. He finished for her, gently. Other times it brings fear. Lyrian exhaled, a soft, trembling sound. My people believe that if the night wind speaks your name, you must stay inside until the next sunrise. Nothing more, nothing less. It is how we keep one another safe. Ethan studied her face, the calm surface barely hiding the strain underneath. She was trying to sound factual, almost ceremonial, but her fingers kept brushing the edges of the nearest chime, grounding herself like someone steadying their breath during turbulence. But why my suit? Why would it whisper to me, he asked. I am not from here. I do not even understand your wind patterns yet. Lyrian looked up, meeting his eyes with a steadiness that was too honest to hide behind tradition. Because you heard it first. And that matters more than you know. The air shifted then, a gentle push against the hillside, lifting strands of her silver-blue hair. The lanterns flickered, reacting to the faint change in pressure. Ethan's wrist scanner buzzed, picking up the beginning of another wind cycle cresting over the ridge. Storm front, he asked. Lyrian hesitated. Not exactly. It is the early breath of it. You should not be out here when the second breath arrives. Ethan glanced at the path, the distance to the outpost, and the speed of the wind showing on his scanner. He was not going to outrun anything tonight. She saw the realization settle in his eyes. There is shelter, she said quietly. My home is built into the ridge. Stone walls. No exposed beams. It will be safe. Ethan offered a half smile. Are you sure? I do not want to intrude. You are not intruding, she said softly. You are in danger. Another gust rolled down from the ridge, this one carrying a faint tremor of tone, almost like a breath warming before forming a word. Ethan felt the hairs on his arms rise even through the suit. Lyrian reached out, not touching him, but guiding him with a tilt of her hand toward the carved entrance at the base of the ridge. Please, she whispered, before it learns to say your name too. The chimes trembled again, answering something. Neither of them could see. The ridge took the wind first, breaking it into long, low shivers that rolled down the stone as Ethan followed Lyrian toward the narrow entrance carved into the hillside. Lanterns along the path dimmed and brightened in uneven pulses, reacting to subtle pressure changes in the air. It felt like walking into a held breath. Lyrian pushed her palm against a smooth panel of stone, and the door slid aside with a soft vibration. Warm light spilled from within, gentle and steady, like it had been waiting for them. Ethan stepped inside and felt the shift instantly. The air was still. No tremble, no whisper riding the edges. Just silence, cool and clean, as if the wind had never existed out here. Lyrian secured the door, her fingers moving through a practiced pattern, and only when a faint click settled into place did her shoulders loosen. The stone carries our warmth, she said, turning toward him. It will keep the wind out. Ethan removed his gloves, grateful for the warmth seeping from the floor. I can see why you live in the ridge. The outside feels like the whole planet is listening. Lyrian touched one of the bioluminescent fixtures on the wall, dimming it slightly. Listening is not dangerous. It is answering that we fear. Ethan watched her move with a kind of silent precision, as if she was afraid to disturb whatever fragile calm they had built by coming inside. Back on Earth, he said, storms were simple. Air pressure, humidity shifts, heat bursts. Nothing personal. She looked at him with a softness he had not seen before. Nothing on this world is personal until it calls your name. The room was small but carefully shaped, the walls polished smooth with faint spiral carvings that caught the light. A cluster of wind chimes rested along a low table, each one carved from different minerals that glowed in gentle gradients. They looked delicate, but Ethan could tell they were tools, not decorations, tuned to something deeper than airflow. Lyrian poured steaming liquid into 2 small cups, the scent warm and citrus-like. She handed one to him, her fingers steady now. This helps when the wind grows restless. Ethan took a careful sip. It was sweet, grounding, nothing like the bitter rations he was used to. Thank you, he said. She sat across from him, hands around her cup. When the night wind calls a name, it does not mean harm. It means attention. You heard mine because something about your presence was strong enough for it to echo. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Strong in what way? She hesitated, choosing her words with care. Intensity. Focus. You look at things as if they must make sense. The wind reflects that focus. It repeats the strongest call in the dusk air. Someone, something, or even a memory can create that pull. Ethan leaned back slightly. I did not call your name. Her eyes lifted, steady and searching. Not with your voice. The silence that followed was different from the one outside. This one felt warm, like the room itself was leaning closer. The ridge hummed faintly, a soft vibration, the outer stone adjusting to the wind pressing against it. Ethan set his cup down gently. Lyrian, if this thing out there is reacting to me, I need to understand what it wants. She shook her head slowly. The wind does not want. It reflects. It returns what is already in the air. But if it continues to speak my name near you, the elders will ask questions. A quieter gust pressed against the stone, barely noticeable, but both of them felt it. Lyrian stood, moving to the wall where the faint vibrations were easiest to sense. Her blue-silver skin caught the warm light as she placed her palm against the stone. It is learning the pressure pattern of the shelter, she whispered. It never does that unless. Ethan stepped closer, his voice softer. Unless what? She turned to him, eyes wide with something between fear and certainty. Unless the wind believes you will come back tomorrow. The ridge shelter held its steady warmth through the night, but Ethan barely noticed it now. Lyrian's words lingered in the quiet space between them, settling in with the same persistent weight as the wind pressing against the stone. He tried to mask the flicker of confusion on his face by checking his wrist scanner again, even though he already knew the readings by heart. So the wind thinks I am coming back tomorrow, he said. I did not exactly make a reservation. Lyrian almost smiled, a soft, fleeting expression that dimmed just as quickly. It does not predict. It responds. Something in your presence marked the air. The night wind is echoing that expectation. Ethan exhaled slowly. Back on Earth, weather patterns never cared where I stood. Just data and gravity. She stepped closer, studying his scanner as its lights reflected off her blue-silver skin. The wind here is old, Ethan. Older than our villages, older than any of the stonework. We learned to listen because we had no choice. It does not hate. It does not favor. It simply reflects what is strongest. And what exactly is it reflecting about me? He asked. Her gaze shifted upward, thoughtful and searching. You walked onto our land with certainty. Humans usually hesitate when they feel the first shift of the wind. I do not hesitate, he said quietly. Not anymore. She nodded once, as if that answer made more sense than he intended. A subtle vibration rippled through the floor then, a gentle thrum that pulsed up through the stone. Lyrian pressed her palm against the wall again. The second breath is passing, she whispered. It will not enter, but it wants to understand why you are here. Ethan felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Because my turbine failed. Because I took the wrong path. Because your lanterns were the closest light source. She shook her head gently. Those are reasons of the mind. The wind reflects reasons of the heart. Ethan opened his mouth to answer, but a soft chime sounded from deeper inside the shelter. She motioned for him to follow. They entered a narrow chamber lit by a single, warm lantern. The walls were engraved with swirling patterns that resembled layered pressure waves, spiraling inward toward a raised stone at the center. This is our quiet stone, she explained. When the wind names someone, we sit here until dawn. It helps the name release its hold. Ethan looked at the stone, then at her. So you want me to sit? Yes, she said softly. Just long enough for the wind to understand you are safe. He hesitated, then nodded and lowered himself onto the quiet stone. It was warm, almost unexpectedly so, like sun-heated rock even though no sunlight touched it. Lyrian stood beside him, hands folded, her expression calm but focused. Close your eyes, she said. Listen to the stone, not the wind. Ethan did as she asked. The warmth seeped up his spine, softening the tightness he had not realized he carried. The shelter hummed faintly, steady and rhythmic, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. His breathing slowed. The pressure outside shifted again, but the walls absorbed it before the sound could fully form. Lyrian's voice broke the quiet, barely above a whisper. The wind does not say a name without reason. Even if you did not speak mine, something inside you called it. Ethan opened his eyes, meeting her gaze. And what happens if the wind calls again tomorrow? She held his eyes for a long moment, something gentle and unguarded moving behind her expression. Then, she said softly, it means the reason came from you, not the storm. Morning on Varelia did not arrive with sunlight, but with a slow brightening of the sky, a pale blue glow that seeped through the ridge stone like a quiet reassurance. Ethan blinked awake on the quiet stone, his back warm, his mind surprisingly clear. For the first time since hearing that whisper on the plains, the world felt still. Lyrian sat nearby, legs folded neatly beneath her, her eyes half closed as if listening to something deeper than sound. When she noticed him stirring, she spoke softly. The dawn breath has passed. The wind has released your name for now. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. For now, meaning it might decide to pick it back up later? Her expression carried something between caution and empathy. It depends. The night wind follows patterns of intention, not schedules. He stood slowly, stretching the stiffness from his shoulders. I should get back before the outpost starts thinking I fell off a cliff. Your people worry quickly, she replied with a small smile. Mine worry slowly, but the wait lasts longer. Ethan glanced toward the shelter entrance. The stone had cooled, and the faint hum that protected them overnight had faded with the shifting air outside. Thank you, he said. I know this was not how you planned your evening. Lyrian lifted one shoulder gently. When the wind calls a name, plans change. They stepped outside together, and the cool morning brushed against them. The plains stretched out wide, washed in pale light. The turbines he had been repairing last night now stood still, blades glinting with frost. Ethan checked his scanner, relieved to see stable pressure readings. If the wind can reflect intention, he said thoughtfully, then maybe it reacted to something in my equipment. A frequency mismatch, an unfiltered resonance. Lyrian watched him with a patient, almost curious gaze. That could be true in part. But the wind repeats what it feels most strongly. Machines cannot feel. Then what did it echo? Ethan asked. She did not answer right away. Instead, she walked a few steps ahead, the frost crunching softly beneath her boots. Sometimes, she said, the wind echoes a question a person carries without knowing they asked it. Ethan followed her gaze toward the plains, recalling the whisper that had threaded through the gusts, repeating her name with unsettling clarity. I did not intend anything, he insisted gently. I was just fixing a turbine. Lyrian's voice lowered. Your mind may have been on your work, but your heart was calling something else. She paused, then added, the quiet stone reflected that. Ethan looked down at his hands, uncertain how to respond. He had always trusted data, trusted readings, trusted logic. But nothing about last night fit inside a graph or a pressure chart. Lyrian turned toward him fully now, the morning light softening the silver edges of her features. Whatever the wind heard in you, she said, it was not dangerous. If it had sensed fear or anger, it would have spoken differently. Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but a faint rustle interrupted him. A breeze drifted across the ridge, gentle and passing, carrying no whisper, no name, only the cool breath of early day. Lyrian watched it move through the grass. That is the morning wind, she said. It carries nothing but waking. Ethan felt a small, unexpected relief. So it is safe for me to head back? Yes, she said, though something in her expression hinted she was not entirely certain. As he started down the path, Lyrian called after him, her voice lighter than before. Ethan, if the wind speaks again tonight, do not ignore it. He turned. Should I come back here? She hesitated only a moment. The wind will tell you where to go. But if it speaks my name again, you should not face it alone. Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of her words settle deeper than he expected. As he walked toward the outpost, the plains quiet and silver under the waking sky, he could not shake the strange, steady thought forming in the back of his mind. Something in the wind had changed, and he was no longer just passing through this world. The world, in its own way, had noticed him. The outpost came into view just as the mid-morning light settled across the plains, turning the frost into a sheet of pale shimmer. Ethan stepped through the security gate, and the familiar hum of human-built systems greeted him, steady and predictable. A few technicians glanced his way with raised eyebrows, but no one asked where he had spent the night. He was grateful for that small mercy. He went straight to the diagnostic station and pulled up the turbine logs from the previous evening. The data scrolled across the screen in clean blue lines, perfectly measurable, perfectly logical. Yet all he could think about was the whisper that had threaded through the wind, the way it had shaped her name so clearly it had felt intentional. Ethan replayed the audio his suit had captured. Static, low-frequency pressure shifts, a faint harmonic surge, nothing resembling a voice, nothing human, nothing alien, nothing audible to anyone except him. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You are early," a voice said behind him. Ethan turned to see Commander Holt, his supervisor, holding a tablet and a mug of something steaming. "We did not expect you back until noon." Ethan forced a calm reply. "The readings stabilized sooner than expected." Holt grunted, glancing at the turbine logs. "Good. We cannot afford failures this week. The storm fronts rolling in have been unpredictable." Ethan hesitated before asking, "Do you know anything about local wind patterns near the ridge? Anything unusual?" Holt shot him a look. "Unusual is normal on this planet. But if you are referring to the locals and their stories, save it for your off hours." Ethan nodded, but the commander's reaction confirmed something. Humans had dismissed the lore long before understanding the land. He spent the rest of the morning inspecting sensor panels, recalibrating instruments, and pretending he was not listening for a sound that did not belong in the realm of machines. By mid-afternoon, the sky dimmed again, earlier than expected. A faint ripple moved across the plains, a tremor just above hearing range. Ethan paused outside the outpost gate, scanning the horizon. The air was still, but the stillness felt intentional, like the world was waiting for something to begin. As he adjusted the strap on his tool pack, a soft vibration pulsed against his wrist. His scanner blinked in alert. Pressure shift detected. Direction, ridge. Magnitude, uncertain. Ethan swallowed. It was happening earlier than the previous night. He tried to tell himself he should stay at the outpost. He should report the anomaly. He should rely on training, not instinct. But the thought of Lyrian alone in the stone shelter while the wind learned new patterns tightened something in his chest. He stepped outside the gate. The first gust touched his jacket like a question. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief moment, listening. Nothing. Then a second gust, cooler, brushing past his ear with a faint tone carried within it. Not a name. Not yet. But something close to recognition. Ethan opened his eyes. His feet were already turning toward the ridge. The plain stretched wide and quiet, the path ahead lit only by the thickening glow of the early dusk. As he walked, the breeze followed, light and steady, circling him without speaking, as if waiting for permission to say whatever it had carried the night before. Halfway to the ridge, a lantern flickered to life beneath the first outcrop of stone. Someone had lit it. Someone who expected him. Ethan felt the wind shift at his back, not pushing him forward, not pulling him back, only acknowledging him. And for the second night in a row, he understood something he could not explain. The wind was not searching for a name. It was searching for him. The lantern burned steady beneath the ridge outcrop, its glow reflecting softly across the stone as Ethan climbed the last rise. The wind had followed him the entire way, not speaking, not pushing, only circling like it was learning the rhythm of his footsteps. Lyrian stepped into view before he could call her name. She stood just outside the shelter entrance, her blue-silver skin catching the early dusk light, her expression calm but shadowed with something he could not quite read. "You came," she said quietly. Ethan tried to smile, though his breath was still catching from the climb. "The wind seemed to think I should." She looked past him, toward the plains he had walked alone. "It has been restless since sunrise. The elders say it is not a storm. It is a seeking." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice without realizing it. "Did it speak to you today?" She shook her head. "Not with a name, only with presence." She paused, searching his face as if listening for what he had not yet said. "Did you hear anything?" Ethan hesitated. The truth felt heavier than he expected. "Nothing clear. Not like last night. But it recognized me. I do not know how else to explain it." Lyrian's eyes softened, but worry flickered at the edges. Then the quiet stone did not release everything. She stepped aside for him to enter the shelter, the stone door humming softly as it reacted to her palm. Inside, the warm glow wrapped around them, steady and grounding. The shelter felt unchanged, yet different at the same time, like the air sensed their return. Ethan unfastened the top clasps of his jacket, the warmth easing the cold tension from his shoulders. "You knew I would come back," he murmured. She folded her hands lightly. "The wind rarely returns to someone without reason. And you?" Her voice trailed off before she could finish. He waited, but she turned toward the inner chamber instead. The quiet stone sat where they had left it, still warm from the daylight stored in the ridge. Lyrian touched its surface with a careful hand. "If the wind is seeking, It means something remained unanswered last night. Ethan frowned gently. Such as what? She inhaled softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Your intention. The chamber deepened into quiet, an almost sacred stillness. Ethan stepped closer, feeling the warmth radiating from the stone. My intention was to survive the night, he said. Nothing more. She faced him, her eyes reflecting the steady glow around them. Survival does not call someone's name across the plains. The words struck him deeper than he expected. Lyrian, I did not mean to call you. I did not even know you existed. She held his gaze. Your mind did not know me, but your heart may have known something else. Ethan let the silence sit before answering. I have spent years listening only to readings and numbers. Maybe last night. He paused, searching for the right shape of the truth. Maybe I listened differently. Lyrian studied him for a long, quiet moment. Then she stepped aside, motioning toward the quiet stone. Sit. Let the wind decide what it heard. Ethan settled onto the stone, the warmth grounding him instantly. The hum beneath the surface felt more alive tonight, more alert. Lyrian remained standing, her hand resting lightly on the carved wall as she listened for the slightest tremor. Outside, the dusk deepened. A faint breeze approached the ridge, moving slowly, deliberately, like a traveler returning to a familiar doorstep. Lyrian closed her eyes. Ethan felt the stone shift under him, a gentle vibration rising like a question. Then the softest whisper slid beneath the doorframe. Not a name, not a warning, just a single, quiet tone shaped unmistakably around the breath of a human voice. Lyrian opened her eyes. It is learning you, she said. Ethan swallowed, the truth settling into his chest with steady weight. Why? She did not answer. Instead, she whispered, because someone called out across the wind. And the wind always brings the call back. The tone beneath the doorframe faded, leaving the shelter wrapped in a silence so complete that Ethan could hear his own pulse in his ears. Lyrian stepped back from the wall, her fingertips trembling slightly before she hid her hands within the folds of her sleeves. The soft lantern glow caught the edges of her expression, revealing something between realization and fear. It should not respond this quickly, she whispered. Not unless the call was strong. Ethan stood slowly from the quiet stone, the warmth lingering along his spine. I did not call anything, he said gently. I was looking for a malfunction in my turbine. That is it. The wind does not listen to tools, Lyrian replied. It listens to what lies beneath distraction. Her gaze lingered on him, searching, as if the answer she sought was one he had not discovered yet. The hum of the shelter shifted again, this time softer, like the stone itself was breathing. Ethan moved closer to the entrance, careful not to touch the sealed door. Is it safe to open it? He asked. Not yet, she murmured. It is still learning the contour of your voice. Ethan's brow tightened. Contour. The shape, she said. The feeling behind it. She approached him carefully, stopping just within arm's reach. When you spoke my name last night, even by accident, the wind caught that shape. It echoes significance more than sound. Ethan swallowed, unsure how to respond. I only repeated what I heard. But your fear was real, she said softly. Your concern was real. Emotion leaves a trace in the air. The wind returns what is strongest. Before he could answer, a faint vibration rolled through the stone floor, gentler than before, almost curious. Lyrian's eyes widened. It is not leaving. It is waiting. Ethan braced his hand against the stone archway. Waiting for what? Lyrian hesitated, then stepped closer, lowering her voice. For confession. Confession? Not to me, she said. To yourself. Ethan let out a slow breath, trying to grasp the ancient logic of a world that seemed to speak in symbols rather than rules. Back home, he said quietly. Storms did not care about feelings. Here they do, she replied. Because the wind is not simply weather. It is memory carried forward. Ethan turned toward her, caught by the sincerity in her tone. Memory of what? Of longing, she said. Of fear. Of devotion. Whatever has not been spoken aloud. The words landed deeper than he expected, settling into the spaces he kept guarded for years. He tried to deflect with a small, shaky smile. You make it sound like the wind understands me better than I do. Lyrian held his gaze, steady and unwavering. Perhaps it does. A soft knock against the stone startled them both. It was not a hand. It was the wind, mimicking the rhythm of human touch, as if requesting entry. Lyrian stepped forward, her voice firm but calm. You cannot open the door, Ethan. Not until you decide what the wind is reflecting. He backed away slowly. But what if I do not know? Then it will keep asking, she whispered. The air thinned for a moment, a subtle draw inward as though the world held its breath. Ethan felt a warmth rise in his chest, the same warmth he had felt when Lyrian had guided him into shelter the night before, when she had whispered fears she trusted him to hear. The wind brushed the stone again, softer this time, almost gentle. Lyrian tilted her head, listening. It is not calling my name tonight, she said. Ethan felt the truth before she spoke the last words. It is calling yours. The sound of his own name, shaped by nothing human, drifted through the narrow seam beneath the stone door. It was barely more than a breath, but Ethan felt it settle into his chest like a truth he could no longer outrun. Lyrian stood frozen, her eyes widening with a mix of awe and apprehension. The wind had never spoken a human name in her lifetime. She took a careful step toward him, her voice soft but steady. Ethan, the wind is not choosing you. It is answering you. He shook his head slowly. I did not call out. I did not ask for anything. You asked for understanding, she whispered. Last night, when you were afraid, when you repeated my name with meaning you did not realize you carried. Another faint tone pressed against the stone, warmer this time, as if the wind itself was reaching with an unfamiliar tenderness. Ethan felt the vibration rise through the floor, matching the rhythm of his heartbeat. If it is calling me, he said quietly, what does it want me to do? Lyrian looked toward the door, her expression softening into something almost mournful. It wants you to speak the truth it carried back. He swallowed, a tightness forming in his throat. What truth? She stepped closer, close enough that the lantern glow caught the silver threads in her hair. The truth you have kept buried since you arrived on this world. The truth of why the wind echoed my name through you. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, to deny, to cling to logic because it felt safer than emotion, but the wind's soft call brushed the stone again, a single, patient note like a hand resting gently on a shoulder. He closed his eyes, and the memory rose. The lonely walk across the plains on his first day, the ache of losing people back home, the feeling of being unseen, unheard, misplaced in a universe too vast for one human voice. Then her, Lyrian, a stranger who looked at him differently than anyone had in years. Not as a technician, not as a guest on her world, but as something quietly significant. When he opened his eyes, she was still there, waiting, listening the way the wind listened. I did not call your name because I knew you, Ethan said softly. I called it because I wanted something to anchor me. Something real. Lyrian's breath caught, a subtle lift of her chest, and the wind answered that longing. I did not mean for it to take hold, he said. But when I heard your name, I felt connected, like the world was pointing me toward someone who understood its language better than I ever could. The shelter seemed to warm around them, as if the stone walls approved of the words finally spoken aloud. Lyrian's eyes shimmered with something gentle, almost luminous. You were not calling for me, she whispered. You were calling for belonging, and I happened to be the first to hear it. The wind brushed the door once more, softer than before, a fading echo that sounded strangely content. Then the pressure shifted, and the tone dissolved into the night air outside. Lyrian placed her palm against the stone, listening. After a long, steady moment, she turned back to him. It is done, she said. It has released your name. Ethan let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. So it will not call again? Not unless you ask it to, she said. The quiet between them felt different now. Not empty, not tense, just full of something unspoken and warm. Ethan stepped beside her, both of them facing the sealed stone door as the wind settled into peaceful silence. Lyrian's voice softened into a whisper. Tonight, the wind carried truth. And truth, once spoken, asks for nothing else. Ethan nodded, the smallest smile touching his lips as the last of the night wind faded. For the first time since setting foot on Varelia, he felt the calm of a world that had finally stopped calling and had started listening instead.